Welcome back to another episode of the Let's Grow Show. I'm Scott McLaughlin. I'm joined by Mark Civitella. Again, we're talking about what's right and what's right now. Today, we're going to focus on the context of time and timing, and I think particularly pertinent to our decision-making, the role that media is playing in our, perhaps movement towards right now decision-making, managing crises, and also in that crisis management area, like factoring in the time and time pressure that one's got to turn around a decision or a statement in that case. And then just talk broadly about megatrends. We hope to get through it all. Mark's done an awful lot of pre-work for this particular episode. So I'll hand over to Mr. Civitella to take us away and lead us off.
Oh, thanks, Scott. And thanks for having me back. But of course, all of this work is heading towards that book that with may not be a stock for Christmas, but I can't imagine a house not having one when it's finally out, because if not, it wouldn't be a home, Scott.
It would not be a home. No, that's true. Every house used to have a copy of Right Now. And in fact, probably the biggest impulse to our hitting that timeline of Christmas would be us, really, because we keep coming up with new ideas and new examples and things like that. So the content just keeps flowing. We thought we were at editing, but we're at adding, and then we've got to edit again. So yeah.
I'd like to think of us both as the biggest impediments to our own success, Scott.
Yes, indeed.
Let's move on to the topic. Because I suppose, as you've known me for a long time, but I suppose most of my career I've been working in those sorts of areas of crisis management and things, and really in without going into the mechanics of it and all the rest, when it's often for an organisation or a leader or something, it's all been going well. Everything that they've relied upon, the sort of decision-making paradigms that have brought an organisation to levels of success, all of a sudden it collapses, and the things you've relied upon for decision making and all the rest have simply dissolved into air in a particular time period as a result of something you've done, or in fact something that's happened elsewhere. And we're now living in a world where pages that were adjusted 2 years ago blowing up, and walkie-talkies and all that. I mean, this and the flow on of that is for those of us that we're now looking at can in fact the US import a Chinese car because it may have particular adjustments to its intelligence systems, and it could actually be used to assassinate the driver, is literally the sort of media. Now, obviously for Australia, that imports a lot of iron ore to China to make the cars that are bought by the Americans. I mean, we're all involved in this, but somehow or other, the Israelis do something and China's responding. So that's the sort of world where someone has called me in and said, well, can you give us some advice? How do we handle this? What are we going to do? And these things are all based, and it's that incredible thing which we often overlook because we take it for granted, is the impact of time, and how time from moment to moment can actually change the decision making that you're going to have to make on what may have been obvious and simple today is tomorrow totally complex and mind-blowing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And often, Scott, we often think of ourselves as decision-making machines. Like every day you get up, what am I going to do? What am I going to eat? Where am I going to go? What sort of coffee I'm going to get? But in a funny way, the reality is, and I don't say this about every one of us, we make the same decision lots and lots of times, in our lifetime. It's when we confront those really big decisions that we get anxious and nervous, and all those other sorts of emotions come into play because of the impact of the consequence of those decisions. It's really hard to envisage the full scope of consequence, and that actually brings anxiety. And the really interesting thing about that sort of paradigm is whereas we've done everything we can to extract it from daily life, like I get up every day, I get up, I don't want to shock you, the temperature is exactly the same in the house. I get into a car and the temperature is set for the same temperature, and I pretty well have the same cup of coffee from the same
23
place.
degrees Celsius. What is that Fahrenheit for our northern? Let me check. Just so it's relatable, because that is the preferred temperature, isn't it?
Yeah, I think what that is seems to be how we want, and that's sort of like civilization. You know, this, we've become civilized. We can, you know, manage the temperature. We can do all this, and really, it's when all that goes out the window, because if you actually walk outside of your house or outside, yeah, it's either pelting with rain, it's too hot, there's a gust of wind, there's a cyclone, in fact, the world doesn't come like that, but we've made it like that because somehow or other in our makeup, we sort of like it like that. And even if your coffee's not quite right, it wasn't as good today as it was yesterday. We've
true.
Ourselves to this.
So true. It's interesting, right? When I think about that, you know, what you talked about with the US talking about banning Chinese vehicles, or more particularly Chinese hardware and software, because they've been rather specific about it, in automobiles, and I imagine going forward in computing and other things. Probably the topical component of that, Mark, for this episode is, why now? Was it because of the pages in you know, like, was it because of the pager bombs? Like, why are we doing that now? Have you suddenly realized? I mean, the US has got incredible intelligence bodies that would be across this stuff like you wouldn't believe. So pages go off and all of a sudden it's like Chinese cars. I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, I think it is the timing, because all of a sudden it becomes an event that we've all noticed.
Yeah.
So almost like the liability of this extends into government and decision making. If we don't know about it, it's hardly a problem for government. But the minute it's a fact that government has to respond, and government sets regulatory policy and import policy and so on. And of course, then you're subject to a whole lot of things. You know, Australia and the US, to use that, you know, as an AUKUS defence agreement. You know, in any defence agreement, it's worthless unless you've got an enemy. You know, you don't point the missiles at each other. You've got to find an enemy. If not, the economics of it doesn't work. It's really quite pointless to blow each other up. You know, so how does this? You know, so how are we going to make decisions in this sort of paradigm? You're absolutely right. Is all of a sudden this stuff gets into the media, gets into it. And I suppose that's the area where all of a sudden you've got a whole lot of vehicle manufacturers backtracking, making comments and all the rest, and a whole lot of probably, you know, Japanese vehicle manufacturers as well as US vehicle, because Australia doesn't make cars, thinking, well, here's our chance. Someone's going to get a bonus out of this, and someone's going to lose a lot of money if it proceeds. So, you know, so that's the sort of thing. And that in that funny way, it's got to say, well, was the decision of the CEO of that automotive company? Their bonuses are riding on, you know, the biggest market in the world may, you know, slow down your. How is that decision going to flow around from everything from from the highest paid people in the world, right down to someone who's trying to buy a cheap car? These are the sorts of things that the high level impact of that uncertainty is quite profound. Whereas the decision making we make every day, those simple decisions, really doesn't have a significant impact in quite the same way. And I suppose when we look at this and we talk about how an organisation, particularly large organisations, high impact organisations, how their executives can make decisions in a world that is ever more connected, and ever more connected means ever more higher impact of that uncertainty as it flows through. If you're not connected, it doesn't matter. You know, once you're connected, it does matter. Yeah. And so what you get, I think, as well, Scott, we were talking about, is all of a sudden we have these lives where we want it very routinized. I mean, I you know, quite like, you know, you're watching the same, doing the same. You know, it's quite comforting. But all of a sudden, all our entertainment and all these things that sort of come to us that we're drawn to, because we still have, if you like, we're still evolved. You know, taking the Darwinian perspective, we still are capable of making right now decisions and right decisions.
Well, it's
time you turn on the TV, if you don't get your bathroom renovated in the week, you're going to lose points and lose the show and be evicted from the island or whatever. Everything is right now. All the entertainment is so focused on right now. All the things that we're looking at, social media is right now. But for us,
exactly,
we want the screen between us because we're actually operating in a right sort of paradigm. Our decision making is quite different to the entertainment and to the information paradigms, which I think are sometimes quite frightening and stressful.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting because perhaps it's for many people we don't realize the Groundhog Day that we live, and because I'm ADHD off the Richter and the brain doesn't stop, I continually develop these analogies in real life situations. And the analogy of the vacuum cleaner always gets me because when you're vacuuming your house, you know well before the vacuum knows that there's a piece of furniture coming, or there's a corner, or there's something to orientate, and yet we find ourselves getting stuck on that corner. And I feel like it's kind of how we're doing life at the moment, in the sense that we don't recognize the groundhogness of our lives, and then something goes a little bit and we're like, oh, what do we do? What do we do? And COVID was an excellent case study in that, where we saw a complete psychosocial meltdown or regression in people, logically speaking, because their locus of control had shrunk so much, and they're like, shit, all these other people are in control, what do I do? And we are in that sort of moment, in that instant moment. Like, one of the things that I was concerned about through COVID was the consumerism and the online shopping and all that sort of stuff, because in the end, this is always going to be followed by a downturn, an economic downturn. In spite of the incredible magnanimous commentary of the Australian government at the time, that we were in fact in the strongest position ever. Here's the very truth, ladies and gentlemen, is as Australians, Mark and I will testify that when we hear Donald Trump say China, we go, shit, mate, shut up, because they're buying all our iron ore. We need them. We're supposed to be your ally. We need the stuff out of the dirt to go to them. Otherwise we're sunk. We have no Silicon Valley here. We just have massive holes in the dirt. So I think that we are stuck in that kind of immediacy, but I think we also fail to recognize the routine nature of our lives. And I think, Mark, you mentioned about, getting up, having breakfast, dropping the kids at school.
But
to elaborate on that.
Yeah, you throw that into brands, I mean, why do you buy that? I don't know. I always have. Sometimes people say, oh, it's about cultural. No, I just buy it because I couldn't be bothered thinking of all the options. I just don't care enough. And I think we're talking the other night. I think I've now bought the same brand of coffee as an Italian origin. That's a big thing in my life, Scott.
Yes, indeed.
I think maybe 30 years or something. And it's the only thing I notice if the price goes up or down, or it's on sale. I just buy 5 of them if they're on sale. I don't seem to care about as many other things, but I do, and so all of a sudden, what we've really got though is a situation whenever you're put into a role where you have to make these decisions, and you do it in personal life. You reach these sorts of points. There's crossroads. There's big decisions and so on in your personal life. I can remember, you've done my profile, Scott. I was
I have, yeah.
I was a Saab driver for a very, as you'd imagine.
You were indeed. Yeah, you haven't moved far. You're in a Volvo, mate. So
until it went under, and then I was in quandary. I didn't know what to buy because I didn't have to think about it because I sort of liked, that. It's sort of, it's environmental, it's this, it's that, and it's full, and the ads are full of good-looking people. And I thought, that's me. I thought, and in skivvies, was it's northern Europe. It's always cold.
I'm surprised you haven't changed your name to Sven Civitella, to be honest. But yeah.
Anyway, but these are the sorts of things which we confront. I think it's. And to have made your life when you've literally walked into a room because something horrible has happened or something big has happened, and you've got to go in and say everything you did, everything up till now, everything that's made you successful is no longer relevant. There's decision making now. It's going to be right now. In fact, you're going to be making a decision, today about this and this and this, with huge long-term consequences. And by the way, here's the rub, and don't think of this too much before you receive my invoice, is I actually got no idea about a lot of this. I've actually got no idea what the consequence of this will actually be in the long term. We don't know how this is going to roll out in 2 years.
Yeah.
We have to make decisions now because we have to stay. If you're not here, you don't worry about the decision. We've got to stay viable and all the rest as an organisation. And there's just that sort of look when you go in, and it's, in a funny way, it's one of those jobs. No matter how good a job you do, they never want to see you again.
Exactly. Exactly.
Because you're the guy. It's almost like people associate, if you associate a fire truck with the fire. Oh, yeah, where there are fire trucks, there are fires. Fire trucks are therefore bad. Of course, there's always a fire. It's a reverse logic. And I think that's
it's almost as bad as teaching a 2-year-old how to say fire truck. But I'm really interested in this. Like the current situation right now is, and we do not want to be political, nor will we give opinions. But there was an excellent piece written in the Guardian the other day about the pager bombs and the strategy behind it. What was the strategy? What outcome was Netanyahu going for with the pager bombs? And it turns out, and I don't know how true this is, it is in the media, so divide it by 2 and the square root of 4. But I was saying that the strategy was that he had understood that they'd gotten wind of that the pages had been tampered with, so we might as well detonate them now. The strategy was, we've got some left and we've got time, so let's do it. And if you look at overnight, we've had, what did you say, 200 missiles, Iranian missiles?
Yeah.
Jerusalem, gee whiz. Yeah, it's like, where is it heading? And what was the, in hindsight now, like what was the upside of the, other than inflammation, what was the upside of the pager bombs where innocent people died? And people were talking about what a masterful James Bond thing it was. But those people with those pages were standing next to civilians and children and other people when those bombs went off, right?
Yeah.
So anyway.
And likewise with the missiles that were fired, likewise.
Yes, exactly. On both sides of the fence.
The greatest victims, are always the innocent in any situation. So it's always a, really, really difficult, really difficult thing to comment on. But in war and politics and all the rest, they are the ones that, that are often now going to be thrust into the right now and the decision making. And you refer back to COVID. COVID was an extraordinary right now moment where those decisions were, about today, hopefully to make the future better. And as we discussed, all of a sudden, all these drugs that we all took back, they're all banned now. You can't get half them, the ones that we all took here in Australia, you can't get them anymore. Was they actually killed them. So, these are but at the time, I'm thinking, thank goodness, there's in a situation like pager bombs. I mean, the thinking really is this is and those decisions was made 2 years ago. This was before there was an incursion and all the rest, and West Bank and so on, and the history of it. And this is just it's an extraordinary thing to happen, but it's one of those ones that you go, oh, and I can still there are those few of those moments. And I can remember, the 9/11, the Twin Towers.
Yeah, exactly. Never forget that.
There's few moments in your life, and of course I was there a month before on one of the. I was like, I was there. Happened to be in you, and where you're watching television and you're actually thinking, I have no idea how to process what I'm watching. I don't understand what's happened.
And where it leads, right?
A mental capacity to process this. I don't know how that, and I think there was this sort of, this happened obviously to, I wasn't alone, there were, process this, what I'm seeing, and what, and this was highly stressful. People were just addicted to watching. It was this stressful, addictive, horrible event. And these are the things that continue because it's sort of not part of our, because I go to the same place, I get a coffee, I get, and this is something which is, well, it's all changed now. All changed now. Everything's changed.
Exactly.
COVID, everything changed. I can't go and buy that coffee. We're actually locked down. Great lockdown practitioners here where we are, Scott. World number one, mate. Number one, numero uno. We were most locked down. So these are the sort of these are the things which, when you conflate the normal everyday decision makings, the getting it right, making sure the right coffee, this is what, all those decisions you make, and then this thing, and you go, okay, wow, now what? And
that's exactly right.
And it's having to make decisions in that terrain. They're different terrains, That terrain is different to that terrain. This terrain is very different. And my favorite example of this, just say, when you get it totally wrong is when you don't understand the terrain's changed.
That's right.
I think probably, there's a quite a famous example in Australia, and it was like one of those theme parks, kids, families, and it was a horrible accident, and some people were killed. One of the rides went totally wrong. People were killed, and the people running it said, oh, well, we're going to close, people have to come in, ambulance, coroner. I said, oh, well, we'll be open Friday. Don't worry, business as usual. And you think, no, there is no business as usual when that event happens. It was catastrophic and so bad.
Absolutely.
That the families were watching it happen. This is beyond stress. And
absolutely.
All the empathy is with the families, of course. When you watch that, then they say, okay, so the following week they've got the AGM scheduled. Well, they'd be cancelling that, you'd think. No.
You'd think, no. BAU.
An AGM's about money. It's for investors. You're going to go and talk about money instead of the death of people and children and impact on families. Are you crazy? And they actually did it. And it was a disaster, and it was.
Is it not dissimilar, Mark, to COVID? Like, we talk about stimulus and response, right? So, but the response has different machinations, and I think what we've seen with situations like this is I'm going to call it an industrial response rather than a human response, right? So, the response to COVID, particularly here in Victoria and Melbourne, 263 days of lockdown, militant enforcement of lockdowns. Can't do this, can't do that if not immunized. That's not a nuance for us. It was happening the world over. But the focus was on the rules, not on the people. The focus was not on how is everyone feeling. The focus is on what is it that we must be doing. And the commentary was hardly ever about how to take care of yourself mentally, physically, in a time like this. The focus was totally on get the jab, do this, don't go anywhere, that sort of stuff. And there was a stunning lack of empathy for humans. And are we not seeing that again? We talk about, we're going to set off a bunch of page bombs. I wonder where that might lead. Well, if you think about a human response, it leads with, fuck you, we're coming back at you.
So what we have is that escalation, but then there's all the third party impacts, and none of this leads to a good spot, I don't think, ultimately. And I understand anger and defend your borders, all that, right? Okay, but really, because all I saw on YouTube or on my social media feed was some guy selling vegetables at a market getting blown by someone else's page. He's selling vegetables at the market, mate.
Yeah, exactly. But are we not seeing the same thing here? I comment regularly about pricing strategies of major grocers here in a rather monopolised or duopolised market in Australia, and now the government has actually taken the two retailers to task around some of these pricing and promotional strategies. What's the long-term impact? And I've talked before about the point of, that stress point where people will go, no, I'm going to go somewhere else. But it's more than that. This is a time of increased household cost of living, and you're artificially increasing our cost of living for gain, and they're pressure testing. In my view, they're pressure testing the consumer. How is it that that's half price and it was, it's $40 today when in fact it used to be $35 full price? Like, how is it that works? People aren't stupid, and they will have a human response to this. At a time when my mortgage was out of control, where factors that were outside of my control economically, such as interest rates, at a time where that stuff was really hurting me, you guys decided to take advantage.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah. And I think, and the difficulty with this, and there's a lot of work that has been done on this, is, you think back to any of those, big events like that. What's the long-term damage for those organisations? Now, if you're in a sort of if you think of those supermarket sort of things in Australia, of which there's been people complaining for some decades about market control. Now someone finally has decided we ought to have a look at that, and this isn't good. Is that, well, they have got away with it for a generation. Will this impact the share price? Will it? I don't know. Sometimes in a job, everyone I ever know who jumps on one of our fantastic airlines, the first thing they do is complain either about the airline, it was late, it was this or that, but that's it. If you want to get from A to B, you've got to go to the airport, get on an airplane, and your choices are limited. And
that's right.
And so you're stuck with. And so, is there any? Does that complaint get heard? Will this amount in anything? Can a government force people to reduce prices on particular? Is there going to be another mechanism that shines through and provides a different experience or a different opportunity? Will it? We've seen other people come into the market and do quite well over time. And by niching in a particular way into that market. So these are the questions. I'm not quite sure we can predict.
And I think there needs to be a bit of the American Chinese car thing is really interesting to me, because is it technically possible for that stuff to be interfered with to alter and significantly and harmfully impact Americans? Yes, it is. It is technically possible, for sure. But let's hypothetically put something out there, Mark. Imagine there was a very large Silicon Valley-based company who ran big social platforms, and imagine they were actually manipulating the narrative globally amongst a couple of billion users. Would that be harmful to other nations in the global economy and behaviour? I don't know, but hypothetically, Mark, if such an organisation existed, like Meta, what would happen, right?
For every loser, there's a winner. Winners tend to focus very heavily on how bad the loser is and why they should be losing. And you can see there's going to be some huge advantages to people if, in fact, such a ban or restriction was put in place, because it would effectively mean that you'd have you'd almost have a very almost quasi-monopoly in terms of processes in vehicles, for example, in the United States. Australia will follow, invariably, like the younger brother, hanging sort of follows off to the playground. And so you'll actually have this, maybe totally unwarranted, whatever, but that's it. If pages are blowing up, what else? I mean, once you've seen that, like I said before, once you've seen September 11, what else isn't possible?
That's right.
So, well, I don't know
right.
what's possible. And what the realm of possibility for me after that was so wide.
Yeah, so true.
You don't know what's possible. And so, I think
none of which is good for humanity.
I actually did speak to someone, just obviously for this program, Scott. in
Yes,
defence
indeed.
engineering, and
Research,
in
yes.
fact, it's exactly. Yeah, so, this pager thing. Oh yeah, cars. What if they? Oh, batteries. You can reverse engineer a battery fairly quickly. So if you could knock it out because the doors won't open there electrically, and then the battery catches fire, I believe, is the almost immediate thing you could do straight away. There's something for anyone at home. There's a home hint for
Anyone playing at home, yeah. It's
to reverse engineer a car to kill the occupants.
but let's bring it back to stimulus response actions. Just yesterday, I have amongst my litany of personal issues, Mark, I have a couple, like collecting sneakers, and now I have an optical problem where I have a million sets of glasses. And I saw these glasses that I liked in Costco the other day and pounced on them. And then there's another pair of glasses at this optometrist I really like that I'm going to get. And I went in there to inquire about different colors and whatnot. And I said, as a matter of fact, I bought another pair at Costco the other day, and I showed them. Now, this woman had a choice in that moment, right? So her mission is to build a relationship with me. She knows I've been going to another retailer for countless years to buy my frames and lenses. And I'm a new customer. And she had two choices. She could say, well, that's a really good call and a good price as well. I would have done that too. No, what she chose to do was shit can Costco and their range and my choice, which is entirely against the mission. So in the moment, she felt it was savvy of her to destroy them in order to prop herself up.
No.
And all she did was, in fact, create distance. So I don't think we consider consequence enough. And I think as a society, that treadmill that we're on has us getting stuck like vacuum cleaners on this most minute things, and making the wrong call.
Yeah, but that also symbolises to you broader aspects of society. Why do people feel they're elevated by denigrating others? Why do people think that? Was my sort of response is, oh, you've devalued yourself, that's just, but obviously it must work somewhere. I don't know, you'd know more than me on that one.
Yeah.
But just on that, Scott, you do remind me of my late mother, who was also a fanatic. She had lots of pairs of sunglasses. She had macular degeneration, needed some, also had dementia. So every time she went out, I forgot my glasses, she'd buy another pair. I think at the end of the day, as we were cleaning, there was 100 and something pairs of sunglasses.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, fantastic.
Short of a pair of sunglasses that are good for someone close to 90 years old. I can ship you some. I've got a lot.
That'd be great. Yeah, that'd be great. Oh,
it could be the same thing with you, Scott.
It's probably, I probably already have them, Mark. But
only 100. Only 100.
Yeah. I think that it's really, I've certainly had experiences in my career where the urgency of response is really critical, right? And we saw that with COVID, right? We saw, as you mentioned in the last episode, we saw, the pharmaceutical industry behaving exactly not like the pharmaceutical industry in terms of pumping out solutions that are now banned. We saw this knee-jerk reaction to things because there needed to be a sense of doing something and a sense of controlling things. We saw decisions that in hindsight turned out to be poor ones, like taking kids out of school, things like that. And had systemic impacts. I mean, my daughter, for the better part of 2 years, at the ages of 11 and 12, or 10 or 11, sorry, really didn't have that social aspect to her at an age and phase where that was really critical. What's the longer term impact for her, etc. But none of these human style outcomes are really thought through. The same is true in corporate. The same is true in business. When we think about a situation, we think about how we can maneuver it, and we forget that there's people that we're impacting in the process.
Yeah.
And I think that urgency drives it, right? I mean, I've been in two situations on product recalls, one where I won't go into them. Mark and I was talking about it yesterday. And in one instance, the CEO threw out the PR person, and the objective was to blame the supplier of the upstream goods on the problem. The second version was the CEO getting out in front and talking about the, inherent nature of how, sorry, Matthew Murray's comment just threw me there. The second one was where the CEO came out the front and talked about the value of, the brand to all Australians and the responsibility of the brand to Australians to ensure their safety and to recall the product. And, the latter one gained market share over time and the former one lost it. So I'm getting fashion tips from Matthew Murray here. I don't know whether that's slightly off topic, Matt. I was giving Matt's every time I see Matt talking, he's 6'5". I'm sort of drawn to platform shoes, really. But anyway, so I think, the way we respond and how we see ourselves in that situation, which comes back to an awareness of our position, right? An awareness of who we are and what our responsibility is. And we go back to COVID, who we are as government, who we are as media, who we are, and where we stand in the mind's eye of the people, right?
I think in terms of media, media is about news now. It's all now.
Mm-hmm.
It's about now. And in fact, it's so now that's its downfall. Is it fails to have any sorts of balances in approach because it's about getting it now more than getting it right.
Yeah.
I once spoke to a news editor who said in a regional paper talking about the shift to the modern environment. I don't think that even exists now. That it was a printed newspaper. And he said, we had this thing where we would have this website and we would just get it out now. And we actually got the location of a tragic car accident, an intersection, wrong 3 times before we got it right. And so we had alarmed all these different people, think, oh my God, that's my daughter, that's my husband, that's my... in fact, they were driving that way. They could have been, I haven't heard from them. So the capacity to create panic and stress by getting it wrong, but by being so addicted to the now at the expense of the right thing, is their sort of inherent contradiction and the downfall of traditional news media, if you ask me.
Well, I think Matty Murray has made an interesting comment. So there's a turn up. Thanks, Matt. About our negative bias too, right? And I think we should probably pay some attention to that. And the news feeds off that. It was funny the other day. I was reflecting on what I perceived as this incredible influx of violent crime around Melbourne. But the truth is, I don't watch the news, and I started to watch the news a couple of weeks ago, and went, oh, wow, this is horrific. But it probably isn't. It's probably been a migration because I hate commercial television. And it's true, like in some of the things that Mark wrote, to Matt's point, we talked about this, for those of you that have laboured children's movies, and Matt's still in that zone, the Croods is an excellent example where the belief system, perspective and paradigm was that we needed to stay in the cave. In the same way that we need to show up to work and we need to go to this meeting and we need to put in the extra hours and we need to be seen to be working harder and we need to be sending emails at 10 p.m. to show people that we're committed, and we need to, these paradigms we take forward in the service of others, but in the protection / survival of ourselves. And, there's so much to this around decision making, but most of all, I feel like it, regardless of whether we're talking about marketing, governance, crisis management, or consumerism, we need to step back. We need to step back in the helicopter and say, what is driving this? So, for me, I look at my ridiculous sneaker collection and go, there's something in me that is inherently looking for things outside of me to make me happier. Right? If you sit back and think about, that obsession about, oh, there's another pair I don't need, or the fact that I embarrassingly looked through my selection the other day and went, oh, what are these? And it turns out I hadn't worn them. So
I think the Marxists called it commodity fetishism.
Yes, that's right.
It's such an unpleasant name for it,
Which is at least one of my fetishes that we can talk about openly. But But yeah, I mean, some great comments here, and I feel like there's so much too in today's society where we talk about. There's an excellent book, and I'm trying to think about how long ago it was written. The Paradox of Choice, and it talked about how today in consumerism, and it's true, like if there's a category that I'm not particularly enamored with. I was looking at clothes steamers the other day. I'm trying to, take an alternative view to ironing mark, and I looked at that and I'm like, I've got no idea which of these are any good, and I really don't care. But Amazon said that's their choice. And it looked like pretty good value to me, so that'll do. And we see those referrals and star ratings and things like that influencing our decision because we are running a large capital CBF on a lot of stuff. And people are like, mine's got a who's he what's it, and mine's got this and that feature, and blah, blah. And we're like, I don't know what that means. And inherently, as marketers and consumers, we're missing each other in the crowdedness of communication, right?
Just to go back to your point about the vacuum earlier, Scott, if only you'd realised that they now have vacuums with lights on the front. So at the vacuum head, there's a light, LED light that comes on, and so when you're vacuuming in the dark, wearing
which I often do. Yes. Yes, I'm very partial to that.
Eliminating the path before you, both metaphorically and literally, Scott.
Yeah.
Just don't send a photo. Don't post. You don't want to.
I mean, really interested in some of your thoughts on this, guys. And one of the things I do want to mention is Mark and I have talked about. We want more dialogue around this as we're building the book. Right now, we don't actually need more content, but it's but it'd be really good to see your perspectives on it, and we'll try to continue to introduce concepts around this. And the concept of timing is super critical. And you could argue the other way on COVID that there was very swift action taken by people, but was that potentially more comforting than no action or indecision, right? So not to be critical of the decisions that were made, that with the best intentions, they were trying to keep people safe. But there were impacts that weren't considered in that decision-making. That's true. There wasn't a holistic view of, that stimulus and response. However, the intention was good. And the swiftness of decision-making was, you'd argue, necessary so that people didn't panic and people, behaved in a more controlled manner for the safety of all society, right? So I feel like there's so much to consider around timing and to suggest that was actually a good thing, So, you could argue back to 9/11, was retaliation the first response from a president? I'm trying to recall now. Was the first response compassion or was it retaliation? I can't recall.
From memory, George W. Bush was there. Yeah. It was trying to work out what had happened, I think, was the first, as was the rest of, well, not all the rest of the world. Some people knew what had gone on. But I think it was, and ultimately we had, weapons of mass destruction in Iraq and so on. So, so you can sort of see, and I think it's still a difficult area because, I mean, gee, I think I have been scarred by that, I was literally there a month before. Well, I could have been killed. If only they timed the strike, they would have got rid. They missed it. That's why we missed him, But how horrible was that? These are just, I can remember talking to someone, going up and here's the irony. I use this as an example. I used to lecture on this sort of stuff. And I can remember going into the Twin Tower, it was the Trade Center, and had the tightest security. It had been, it was a truck bomb had gone off some years earlier, and there was bollard security. But this is the most secure building I've ever been in, I said to myself, a month before September. And you go in and use bag checks like you're going through an airport, metal detectors, bag checks, and you're going up to go to the top and have a look and take some photos and all that sort of stuff, tourist stuff. And as you're going in, they check your bag, they, check metal. And I'm thinking, I'm chatting to the lady, oh, where you're from? I'm from Australia. And I'm chatting to the woman who's, doing all the security check and all the rest. Oh, wow, we don't have this at home, sort of thing. Having a pleasant lady go up and thinking this is the most secure building. Of course, I was wrong, and I think she was probably killed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do want to just briefly mention before we wrap up, Matthew has made another good comment, which is, you're on a streak, man. I think you're going to have a good day. He's talked about that the news actually reports rareness, but what I would counter argue to that is not that fact. I think that is a fact, that they like anything that's extreme or frightening or scary, they want to bring to us to scare the bejesus out of us or make themselves more relevant is probably the upshot. So I don't argue that point, but what I would argue is how it's absorbed. What I would argue is how do people take that on? Do they take those rare, extreme points of news, and do they create a narrative in their mind around the normalization? Does it make people more frightened, and does it? And I would suggest that it does.
Yeah, I think as well. I mean, one of the other elements of that is it's conflict sells. There's no point. This happened, no one cared. When there's conflict, and just to get to that point, the news likes to present itself as being balanced. So if you've said this and I disagree, then that's fantastic. If no one disagrees with you, Scott, that's not news. But if I violently disagree with you, we've become news because there's some adversarial relationship. And that's the difficulty, is it needs that. And often that's where the balance goes out, because you might be right, I might be wrong. Why are you covering it? Why are you giving a voice to my idiocy? But it is because it becomes news. And I think that's the difficulty. Whereas if we're all in a little village together and we didn't have that, and someone was off doing something stupid, we'd all just generally tend to ignore them.
Yeah, true. True.
But they're arrogant, but no, that becomes another factor. But at the same time, there are things happening that we really want to know about. We want to be informed about, and we want to see people held to account who do the wrong thing. And so we need it, but a lot of it we don't need. It's only 5% maybe we need. The other 95%, oh my goodness, what's going through their head?
Yeah. You're breaking up at my end a little bit, Mark. I don't know whether you're suffering any instability. Sorry, no. When I say instability, I mean internet instability. I don't mean mental instability. But
I can hear you well.
So guys, just to loop back around to that point. So Mark and I are considering doing an audio where we can get more interaction from you, more conversational interaction. Probably do one a month between now and book launch, and potentially afterward. Just love to get your views on how these issues or that decision-making framework about doing what's right and taking the short-term implication for the long-term good, or doing what's right now, taking that short-term good for a long-term implication. It's something that I'd really invite you all to come along to. So we might set up an audio, and certainly we'll invite everyone who's registered and attended today. But yeah, would love some more input from you guys. Any closing comments, Mark? Because we never stick to half an hour.
No, I think we've taken up a lot of people's time. Very, very grateful. I hope everyone has had a chance to think about the things we don't normally think about every day.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank everyone for joining us. We're going to head off. We'll probably schedule another video, I'd suggest, because the ideas keep flowing. Would really love to get an audio set up. So if you'd like to comment on that, for those of you that are, watching live or watching a recording, please make a comment on the post on the whatever respective channel you're watching this, and let us know if you'd like to participate in an audio event. Mark and I'll set one up. We'll be back with more thoughts on doing what's right, or right now in the coming weeks. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Cheers, Mark.